The rocks themselves started flying. This was the scene in the People's Republic this week, citizens taking to the streets to protest what they claim is a major provocation by Japan. It all came to blows when Japan declared it bought a disputed group of resource-rich islands in the East China Sea, known as the Senkakus by Japan and the Diaoyus by China, and then reports that 2 Japan nationals had landed on the islands.
People landing on the islands is a serious violation of Chinese sovereignty. We urge them not to take any measures to complicate or aggravate the situation. We reserve the right to further react.
In response, 11 Chinese patrol boats headed for the archipelago, ratcheting up tensions and sinking relations to the lowest point in decades. The timing couldn't have been worse. September 18th, the anniversary of the beginning of Japan's 1931 occupation of China. That got the world nervous.
The message that I've tried to convey is a message that we have to urge calm and restraint on all sides.
And business was hurt too. The protest forced a number of big-name Japan companies on the mainland to suspend operations, hurting both sides.
I believe the Chinese government should handle this issue with care, as Japanese companies are important to the Chinese economy in terms of employment.
China and Japan are also major trading partners with annual trade north of $300 billion. Experts say the 2 punching partners actually need each other.
The economic relationship between Japan and China is far too important.
In economic terms, you do want to have a smooth Japan-China relationship, because both the Chinese and the Japanese corporations do depend on each other. They are linked at the hip.
Joining us is Philip Chan, Director of Financial Service Provider Shenyin Wanguo Securities, and from Tokyo, joining us is Nicholas Smith, Director and Strategist at CLSA. Nicholas, let's start with you. This situation got quite out of hand, got quite ugly. Some of the latest surveys have shown that a lot of the Japanese names, many of whom had to shutter their shops and close down their factories, albeit temporarily during the worst of it early in the week, are reconsidering plans for investment and are saying they might even redeploy to other parts in Asia. This is not good.
Well, to be fair, it looked very, very bad at the beginning of the week, and there have been a few jokes about St. Helens. That's to say, if Helen's the face that launched 1,000 ships, we seem to be about 990 short at the moment. So it looked very tense. Obviously, wage rates have been going up in China at almost 20% a year. So the difference between the cost of producing something in China and Mexico, for example, there was a Boston consulting study very recently suggesting that actually if you want delivery in the US, it might be better to produce in Mexico. So I'm sure that people are thinking very carefully about the situation. Yeah.
Right. Philip, weigh in on this. What kind of effect have we seen in the markets? Is there going to be any irreparable lasting damage from this? The protests are spreading. They weren't contained in just the PRC. The South Koreans started to bring that whole comfort woman issue from World War II into the conversation as well. I mean, feelings run deep, and the wounds have never really healed.
That's right, but I agree with I agree with Nick that it looked bad right at the beginning of the week. Mm-hmm. I think that once people begin to focus more on the business side, i.e. the economic benefits of the relationship between Japan and China, and as some of your logos were saying before, it's huge. I mean, the amount of trade between the two is huge now, so it's not something you can be brushed off. So I think that it's something which would have to be sort of like solved between high levels, the high levels of the government. But I think it will be eventually. Yeah.
Nick, I mean, firing off a gun. I mean, any kind of military altercation is not an option because the conclusion in that kind of a scenario is unthinkable, obviously. But what Philip just alluded to, $300 billion plus in trade. I mean, the two countries need each other. This can't be good for either side. Is it going to start affecting, say, bond holdings? These two governments' participation in the respective sovereign credit markets?
The military is absolutely not going to happen. Obviously, the US has said repeatedly from '96 through to just a couple of days ago that the islands are included in the security treaty, and the US would defend Japan if attacked in these islands. So no, that's absolutely not an issue. As far as the bond holdings are concerned, obviously Japan has got a lot of debt, but only 8% of it is held by foreigners, of which about a quarter of that is China. So really China is a rounding error in the debt holdings of Japan. The main point is, I think a lot of things were said that Japan would be the worst hurt of the two of them, and obviously both of them are hurt. But over the last week, Japan's stock market up 2% and China's down 5%.
Mm-hmm. Phil, what is there's some talk out there. It's not very concrete, and it's certainly not quantified in any sense. But you saw early on, how they overturned, their neighbors' Japanese brand cars, right? And started, pelting and defacing and damaging, in some cases, very violent damage. To franchises, employing local Chinese, owned by local franchisers. I mean, I remember the picture of a Chinese woman saying, "I'm Chinese, you just ruined my life in my shop." But is there the potential that people will buy Chinese, whether it's cars, whether it's Chery, Geely, BYDs, or whether it's Gree or Medea or local brands, in defiance?
It's possible for the...
I know it's an open-ended question,
of course,
right? With no real answer.
It's possible for the short term, but I think that, you see, these in a way, some commentators have even said that actually that the demonstrations that we saw were more like a way for the local people to vent off anger at the government, right? The government's handling of this thing. So I think there's a lot of issues at stake, but I think in terms of the what you're alluding to, that is there going to be sort of some backlash against Chinese products in the long run? Japanese products in the long run. I think it's unlikely because, like I said, people
aspire, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they aspire to multinational brands and famous brands.
That's
right.
And then
moving up.
Yes, that's
not
right.
backwards.
That's right. And then also this kind of thing, this kind of issue, whilst it's unfortunate that it's happened, but as I've said, once the leadership changes in China, and then they start maybe dealing with it, then.
Okay. Final word to you, Nick. One of the concerns in China, obviously, is, yes, this was an anti-Japan protest, but the people that turn out, the number of people that turn out, the kind of rage that took place, there's got to be a worry that that kind of mobilization of public opinion could, at some point in the future, be aimed at the Chinese central government. In Tokyo, the nationalistic sentiment and momentum is picking up. Is it not? Is that not a danger? I mean, you're going to have a new prime minister, right? The 11th one in 10 years or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think inside Japan, to talk about any politicians in Japan in Parliament as being nationalist, I think is a little hard to accept. I think a generous way of describing their political views would be flexible. They can't keep their views from flip-flopping one week to the next. So I don't think that's true. I think this has been sparked off by some very... I think the mayor of Tokyo is a different beast entirely and has a lot to do with this having flared up in the first place. But inside China, I would have thought that the problem is that there are banners not only talking about the Japanese, but also talking about their own leaders, whether it's corruption or lack of democracy. So people will be worrying who's going to be the target of this next. And I think other countries will be saying, at the moment, the Japanese, could it be us next? So it isn't good for trade for anybody.
What's that old saying? Make love, not war. Nick, thanks. Have a great rest of your weekend. Phil, appreciate it, okay?